Hi, everybody. For this episode, we're joined by Marquita Butler from Minnesota in the United States. She is the Girls Inc. program director at the Minneapolis YWCA. Marquita is also a city council member where she lives, and she is known as a reliable and humble leader. Marquita, thanks for being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here this morning.
Well, I'm super eager to interview you and get to know you more. And as we're getting to know each other, some of the things really popped out about me. And one is just how much support you had. And we know all the research shows that the more productive factors young people have in their lives, the better their chances are at a positive youth development. As we were getting to know each other, it was so evident to me that your early years bear out that science. You were surrounded by positive, accomplished people who cared deeply for you. Will you just talk a little bit about what your early years were like?
Yeah, so I, as you said, have always been surrounded by a strong family unit and positive family unit. My parents have always instilled in all of us kids that education is important, that being a good person is important, and also being involved in your community is important, and making sure that, the saying, like, too much is given, much is expected. And so, I come from a family that are a lot of social workers and therapists and really in that serving industry. And so, it's not that surprising that I'm, not too far from that in the youth field. So yeah, I definitely had, a loving home, a supportive home, and, really thankful for that to both my parents.
Yeah. And I know even your friends and your extended family, everybody was really trying to pursue something meaningful in their world. And I'm interested to find out all those people we were kind of just talking about that are in the human services industry. Did any of them work with young people like you do?
So my father was a social worker for Hennepin County for many years, and he worked with a lot of youth. He was in different parts of social work and social services during different parts of his career, but he was always very invested in the youth that he worked with. I mean, I've been with him where people have come up to him and like, Mr. Solomon, do you remember me? And this is what I'm doing now. And so he always really poured in to his clients. It wasn't always just about like doing the job as like the social worker, but making sure that they would be set up for success. Also very, very involved in the community, coached football for many years, youth football. And he currently serves on the school board, even though all of his children have been, graduated for many years ago from the high school. But he, still is very involved. And then he'll get, he goes beyond just like sitting at the board meetings. He goes into the school and he runs girls and boy groups. And he was really involved in like the Black History Month programming a couple years ago. So he's always been, very involved. Growing up, my mom she coached us in sports, and, she was very busy as the mom of the house, but she found time to like coach. And my parents have always been like that house that everyone knows that they can come to if they need to eat, they just want to hang out. Like to this day, my friends will talk about like how much love and they've received, in my parents' home. And so we've always kind of been that house that everyone can go to. So yeah, they were always, youth, maybe you wouldn't call them youth workers, and then my mom's a in-home family therapist. And so at Washburn Center for Children. So she's worked with children for, the majority of her career.
So you had a lot of exposure to all this stuff at a very early age. I'm wondering, where do you think your parents got that sense of altruism? Do you know your grandparents well, and were they doing the same kind of thing, or were your parents kind of like first generation, okay, we're just going to pour into giving back to our community?
Yeah, I mean, I did grow up with my grandparents and know them very well. I don't know. I mean, my grandmother, who unfortunately just passed over the holiday, she was really involved in community. So I know that's where my dad got that from, that spirit. We talked a lot she was also very into politics. So she was, she would call me and give me tips, as I was running my campaign and all of that. So she is very involved in her church community. And so that, serving community. And my dad also grew up with his grandparents, who I was fortunate enough to meet, my great grandparents. And they too were like very involved in community. I believe they owned a storefront, and they would, give out food all the time, give people jobs that needed it when they could, even though, they were getting by with little, they made sure to give what they could. And so that's something that I know, that's where my dad got his, desire to help. And then I think for my mom, she grew up like very humble beginnings. And I think, both my grandfather, he was a sheriff in a very small town, and my grandmother, a nurse. And, they were always, working and, trying to provide. And so I think her focus has always really been on like nurturing us kids and making sure that we, had what we needed and had the emotional and physical support and financial support to like be successful.
That's an incredible story. It goes on for generations. You are genetically loaded to give back and to help other people. And you're living out, I think, that lifestyle just as if your parents did. And I think probably doing what they hoped you would do. That's great. And so was academics a big part of that too? Did they really push hard on that? And if they did, how was school for you as a student?
Yeah, I would say my parents weren't strict, or like, I wouldn't use the term pushed hard on it, but academics was very important. I was very involved in sports growing up from a very young age. And we knew that if we wanted to play our sports, like we had to have good grades. That was non-negotiable. What I appreciated about my parents was that they understood that I have 6 siblings, so they understood that, or I'm sorry, 5 siblings, there's 6 of us. They understood that everyone is different. And just because like my sister got straight A's doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to get straight A's or my brother's going to get straight A's, right? Everyone kind of has different abilities. And so they always were encouraged, like, pay attention, show up, do your best. And that, I would say that was the focus. And, if you didn't, then you didn't get to do, what the fun stuff, like the sports or whatever it was that you were into. For me, school, I think it appeared to other people that it was easy for me. But it wasn't. I really struggled in math. Math and science, I think, were really tough for me. English and all of that was fine, but like math and science, I really struggled. My sister, who is right above me, was like straight A student. So like, it was kind of a competition. Like I had to get straight A's too, right? Try to keep up with her. And then I also had friends around me that were very intelligent, very smart. So trying to like keep up with them as well. So, and then we, for college, that was not something that was really optional. Like we started talking about college from a very young age. And so, just having, we'd be on road trips. My dad was like, oh, that's so-and-so college. Like, where do you all want to go? Like, what do you want to study? So it was something that was part of conversation from a very young age. So, when you start getting to the age where you're thinking about where to go for school, it wasn't about if I'm going to school. It's like, what school am I going to and what am I going to major in? So I guess that's how I describe it in my household, how school was a part of our kind of growing up.
I think you really hit the jackpot on terms of like a social support network. You just, everywhere you turned, you had people that were positive influences in your life. And you had so many of them, but did you have a handful or a couple or one that you would consider a mentor? And if so, who were your mentors?
For sure. I've been very fortunate, through the different stages of my life to have mentors I might not have known at the time that they were a mentor. Because, I think when you start talking about mentor, it's something you start hearing in college and, and maybe you hear about it in high school, but I don't think at that age, I was looking at these people as being my mentors. But for sure, there's Miss Ashley. We called her Miss AG because her her name is hyphenated, Miss Ashley Ogrokowski. She was our freshman English teacher at Brooklyn Center High School. And she is one of those people that is very invested the young people that she served. Up to this day, like we still talk today, on Facebook here and there. And, if you invite her to something and she can make it, she'll show up. Right. So she was definitely somebody that I looked to as a mentor. When I was in ninth grade, I had a science teacher, Miss Friedrich, who approached me because at that time I was a class officer. I think I was like the vice president. And then I was also on the student council, and she told me about being student rep on the school board. I had no idea what that was or what it entailed. And so she told me about it, and she was like, I think you should apply. I think it'd be really great to have your voice on the school board. So I applied. She kind of helped me with it. And then I got accepted, and I sat on the school board for 4 years. And I also say with Miss Ashley, she helped me and a few other students go to the school board to start our soccer program. We didn't have a soccer program at our school. And so I think we were being told, like, if we wanted to play soccer, we would have to go to like a neighboring school. But there was enough of us that we knew wanted to play, and we didn't want to do that. So Miss Ashley helped, I think it was two other students, myself, come up with a proposal and like go to the school board. And we ended up my sophomore year, started the soccer program. So that was another like key thing that she helped. So I would say those two people stand out to me, like in my younger, like high school age. And then I've, through time have had, a lot of other mentors.
You probably mentor other people now, maybe, formally or informally, but I'm sure there's other people that come to you. Clearly, young people come to you and you're kind of a mentor for them. But do you still have a mentor today? Is there anybody who kind of fills that role for you now?
Oh, yeah, for sure. One person she probably doesn't even know I consider her a mentor, but one of my...
she'll find out now. Yeah.
Yes, she's become a really good friend as well. Her name is Karen Kelly Arwilla. We worked together at Harvest Network of Schools for 3 years. She was my supervisor. It was a team of 3 of us, and they used to call us the Dream Team because she held a very high bar for our team. And when I came into the position, it was a new role and kind of a new idea, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to figure it out, but she always, held us at such a high bar that there was no question about like we would achieve what the goals were and we would achieve them well. She also, the way in which she supervises and the way in which she interacts with people, she always handles it with such grace. And so a lot of times when I'm flustered, I don't know what to do, I'll think like, what would Karen Kelly Arwilla do in this situation? And she's, I'm able to call her when I'm having a rough day to get advice. And she's a very like prayerful woman and faith-based woman. So like, even if I need a prayer, I know I can call her when I get overwhelmed. And so she's been somebody that's been a very consistent person. I think we worked together. I think we started working together in 2014. So, we've been known each other since then and continue, even though we've all left the organization, have continued to, remain really good friends and a support system. So I would say she is one of my key mentors for sure. And I would say my father, like he is somebody that I go to a lot for things, especially like the city council. And then even with my youth programming, like if I, have an idea about something, just because I know, the amount of years that he invested in youth, and he always has really great ideas. He's able to help me like flush them out. And then he's going to be honest with me. Like if he thinks, something doesn't sound right or doesn't feel right, like he's going to tell me the truth. So he's definitely another person that I look to consistently for like mentorship for sure.
I was wondering if you're going to say your dad, because he sounds like he's been so influential in who you are and has really been a driving force. I know when you first were growing up, you thought one day you wanted to be an attorney and you kind of were pursuing that, but for some reason you chose not to, and then you ended up in youth work. Can you just briefly describe a little bit how you went from wanting to be an attorney to now being a program director for a young person's program?
Yeah. So I think, when we were younger, and this is what I really appreciate about the program that I run now, is that we expose girls to so many different careers, starting
Mm-hmm.
at the middle school age. Um, I feel like when I was growing up, like what we heard about is lawyer, teacher, doctor, engineer. Like those were the careers. Like you didn't really hear about all the things that you could potentially be. And so for whatever reason, lawyer kind of stuck to me, and I got my father had introduced me to Pamela Alexander. She's a judge, and or she was. I'm not sure if she's still on the bench now, but for Hennepin County. And I got to shadow her, and I was just so excited. I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. And then I finished college. I started studying for the LSAT, and I started having conversations with friends that were either in law school or they had recently graduated law school, and they were like, you have to love it. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult for you to get through law school. I also worked full time through most of my collegiate career. And so I was actually kind of feeling burnt out at that point too. So I was like, I just don't know if I have the energy to now pour into, 3 or 4 years of law school. So I kind of, went through a phase where I was trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. Right out of college, I went to work at Target Corp downtown and as a merchandise specialist. So nothing that I had even known about before I graduated. It just an opportunity kind of presented itself, and I applied. And it was a great experience. I loved working downtown. I felt like very important with my business suit on every day, working downtown. But I just didn't feel fulfilled. Like I saw the trajectory on where I could go, because I worked on a team with a buyer and then a business analyst. And so it was like the next step was the business analyst and then a buyer. But what I saw in talking with them is like they didn't really have lives. Like their job was their lives. They made tons of money, but they didn't really have a lot of time outside of work. And that was just not something that I desired to be doing. And then I just always had this kind of empty feeling like I'm not, like I'm missing something. So I started researching graduate schools, and I decided to go to Loyola, University of Loyola, Chicago. And I got my master's in cultural and educational policy studies with a focus on international comparative education. And really my focus, I think at that time, was to work in higher ed and work and study abroad or work with international students, because I'm very passionate about traveling. I'm very passionate about encouraging specifically young people to travel. I encourage everyone to travel, but really young people. And so I thought that was supposed to be what I was, supposed to do. And I went to grad school, and then in my last year, I needed to do an internship. And my friend from high school had started a nonprofit in our old high school where the older high school students, because our school was at the time 7th through 12th grade, and the older, like 11th, 12th grade students would mentor the struggling 7th and 8th grade students. So they would get pulled out of class, and then they'd spend like an hour upstairs, and they would, part of it is like helping mentorship with the older kids. They would kind of get some lessons around study habits and things like that. And then they would get help with like homework, whatever they were struggling in. And so he had asked me to come in and help with some like program and like evaluation, program improvement. And so I accepted, and I was able to just kind of go back and forth between being home and being in Chicago, because I was taking online classes. So I didn't need to be in Chicago, 100%. So I did that, loved it. And then I ended up getting a job offer with the actual school to do like various things. So I was working in the AVID program. I was a lunch aide. I was in the library tutoring. And then the head coach position for the girls soccer team had opened up. And as I said earlier, I like started the program, as a young person. And so when that opportunity opened up, I was like, how cool would that be to like full circle to come back and like coach? And it was a wonderful experience. And then, so that's when I kind of knew like I was supposed to be working, with younger folks. And yeah, that's kind of just how I guess I got into youth work. And since then I've had, different experiences in the nonprofit, a couple of different nonprofits, and then in charter school, public school. So I've had a few different experiences across youth work.
Great. Well, thank you for that the explanation of how you became a youth worker. Everybody's got a different path into this career, it seems like, and yours was an interesting one for sure. Mm-hmm. We have to take a short break. When we come back, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about your direct service to young people. So we'll be right back.
Great.
Marquita, right before the break, I was talking a little bit more about your direct service with young people and what you've learned along the way. And I know you have a motto that you kind of live by, and it's this: your closest friends are a reflection of you. Where did that come from? And do you try to implement that life model with the young people that you work with?
Yeah, for sure. That's something my father told us at a very young age, that to be aware of who you're surrounding yourself with, and who you surround yourself is a reflection of, who you are. And so, you go through different stages, and you may have friends that are knuckleheads or whatever, and they may or may not grow out of it, right? But I think what's important is having that core group that's going to encourage and inspire you to continue to reach your goals and to even aspire for higher goals. I have some really amazing, I have friends that are in my close circle that I've had as early as sixth grade. One of my friends from sixth grade, her name is Elizabeth Allaby, Dr. Elizabeth Allaby. She is a doctor. She started talking about being a doctor when we were playing on the playground. And now she is a OBGYN, and I've seen her full journey, and it's, amazing. I have friends that, from middle school, and we're still very close. And then my, a little bit larger group from college, where we've, became friends in college and have really, stuck together and encouraged each other. And, is it three or four of them now have PhDs or, MBAs? Like, everyone has, a higher degree at this point. And so just being there, to support each other, because, getting through a PhD program or a master's degree program isn't easy. And so having those friends that can continue to push you is, to me, priceless. And so I do talk about that in programming a lot with young people about, so keeping positive people around you. And especially one of my programs is a diversion program. And so I don't do direct service as much anymore in the role that I'm in. But when I have spoken to the girls, I talk a lot about, like, if they're getting in trouble at school, who are you getting in trouble with? And if it's, the same person, well, maybe that person isn't the best person, to be associating with. And I know it's hard to break away from people that you consider a friend, but if they're not doing the right thing and, getting you in trouble, it's probably best to move on. So yes, it's definitely something that over the years I've talked a lot about and encouraged young people to kind of evaluate who it is that they have around them.
Yeah, it's really important because we are a product of the people that we hang out with and spend time with. They certainly are a reflection of us. What about our young people who just don't have that role model? I know so many of us work with young people who are living with trauma and toxic stress. And what do you say to those young people when they don't have the easy person to turn to? What kind of advice do you give them?
Yeah, for sure. I think I definitely take for granted sometimes the amount of people positive influences I had in my life. And so I do understand that everyone doesn't have that. But I think there's always going to be that teacher or that coach or, if you attend an after school program, there's going to be somebody that cares enough to invest in you. I have a friend that really struggled at home. She had many siblings and, parents worked a lot to just, provide for the family. So she spent a lot of time after school. And there was one teacher that really invested in her, who she's still very, close with to this day. She calls her like her second mom. And so I do believe that there's always that one person, and it may take a while to identify who that person is, but we all have like that one person that is going to invest in you. And so trying to seek that out, and you have to be open to it. I have somebody that I mentor. We met in the Fast Forward program, and she was like, got on my nerves. Like I to this day, I still laugh about it because like sometimes I would avoid her when I would see her coming because she just got on my nerves. But she kept seeking me out. She kept seeking me out. And then after I started working in the Avid program, she was like, Miss Butler, come work with our group. Come work with our group. And I was like, okay. And it was her senior year, and it was 2 other seniors, and they were really struggling with like the senior slide and just, you know, kind of giving up, like, let's hurry up and get to graduation. And a couple of them kind of were clear on where they were going and what they were doing. But Anna, I'm talking about, she was really struggling kind of with what she was going to do. And so just really worked closely with her to figure out, you know, what is it that she wants to do, what's reasonable. And she told me like years later, I was the reason why she went to college. So, and like I said, we're still in contact to this day. And that was that was like 10 years ago. So, you know, I still check up on her here and there, and she'll give me highlights on what it is she's doing. So, yeah, I think there's always going to be that one person that you can find. It may take a little bit, but I definitely acknowledge that a lot of people don't have that. So
I think so too. I think those people are out there, but the problem with so many of our young people is that they've been harmed so much or gone through so much trauma that they don't trust that those people sometimes walk right in front of them and they're just not noticed. And I think that is inherent in the problem. And somehow as youth workers, we have to be so skillful at letting them know that we can be that trusting person and to help them with those kinds of things. You know, young people teach us a lot about ourselves. They don't give us the luxury of just not pondering things. So what have you learned from young people? What has being a youth worker taught you about yourself?
Yeah, definitely to be authentic. When you're not being authentic, young people can they will call you out on it. And, you know, as I've kind of like gotten older and, you know, my closeness in age with them is growing, or, you know, that gap in age is growing. I'm not always going to know the lingo or what it is that you're even talking about when you say some of these, you know, words. Yeah. But I think being honest about that and not always trying to like be the cool person or, and just being like who I am, I feel like young people respect that way more than you trying to like pretend like you know, or somebody else or something else. So definitely they have taught me to like be authentic and be okay with like what I bring to group. So I would say that's probably like my biggest lesson with young people.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're not authentic, they won't gravitate towards you for sure. Mm-hmm. They can see if you're being authentic or not. There are some common myths about young people or youth work or the field of youth work. What do you think one big myth is about being a youth worker?
That's a good question. I think when people say that it's babysitting, I've heard that term a lot, that it's, you know, you're kind of glorified babysitters. And I would say that's definitely not true. Youth work takes skill. It takes patience, and passion. I think, you know, I've definitely had my tough days in youth work. And I think the reason why I continue to stay in it is because of the passion that I have for young people. And so, yeah, I would definitely say like the whole term around babysitting is just very false. We do much more than that.
I think it's difficult to be a youth worker. It takes a life to develop your skills, I think. It's not easy. And to truly be authentic, like you were talking about, is something that takes a lot of self-work as well. And that's not easy. So many people don't want to do that hard work. What's one unique thing about you that you bring to youth work, Marquita? What's just labeled Marquita's strategy or wisdom or...
I would say I try to always get them, no matter how old they are, I always try to get them to think about future. It's something that when I've worked with young people, like just like it was done with me, right? When I talked about how, at a very young age, we talked about college and things like that. And so even if somebody, has had trauma or they don't see like college in sight, and I'm not one of those that like pushes college because maybe that's not what the right fit for you is, but like having those like futuristic conversations, because I think a lot of times, sometimes people are just so stuck in like the day to day and like trying to get through what they're currently in that they don't see what they can be or what they will be, and maybe not be having those conversations at home. And so that's something that I always try to talk to young people about. It's like, what do you think you want to do? Like, what are you passionate about? And how can I help you like come up with a plan? And I think there's never too young to like start having those conversations. So I think that's something that I definitely, that in travel, I always talk to them about travel and why it's important. So, I would say that that's probably what if somebody were to observe me and say what I talk about are kind of my niche, I would say that, like, just keeping them focused on like what they can do and achieve.
It's hard to believe that we're out of time already, Marquita. The time goes by so fast, and I could listen to you talk forever. You're so full of wisdom and so full of hope and just knowledge and confidence. It's just great to listen to you. And I'm so grateful for all the work you do with young people and your ability to take this wonderful upbringing that you had, this enormous safety net, people who just cared deeply for you, and you brought that into the field with you. And I got to believe that's got to carry over and inspire a lot of people to become very good at what they do and show up authentically like you were talking about. So thank you for the work you do, and thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Before we go, though, I always like to give the guests the last word. So what words of wisdom or inspiration would you like to leave with our listeners?
I would say something that was told to me at a very young age and something that I keep with me to this day in all situations is to always leave a place better than you met it. So whether that's a job or school, a team, just making sure that you're showing up and doing your best and making it a better situation than it was when you got there.